Hello, college composition. So this week we're going to go over a lot of stuff regarding source material. So in our reading for the week, there were a couple of really neat ideas in this finding sources section, right? And a lot of it has to do with the way in which you actually conduct a search. A lot of people think, oh, I can just go to Google and I'll just search my topic, right? And in that case, they gave this kind of example in here, this hypothetical example, and in their example, they type in their topic, bottled water quality, and the student gets about 1.2 million hits, right? Well, they start giving some different strategies you can do to narrow your search, which is really useful when you're putting together a research project because you don't have time. Nobody has time to go through 1.2 million hits, right, and find what's actually usable and not usable, especially when you have a deadline on you. So uh, the difference between a keyword search and a subject search is really important. And so when you are using a keyword search, you're going to simply put the terms that you want to appear in the exact order you want it to appear in quotation marks, right? And so for this example, you're going to get, if you did a keyword search exactly like this with bottled water quality in quotes, you're only going to get hits with these three words put together in a row, bottled water quality. Versus if you didn't have these quotation marks around each side of it and you just went to Google and typed in bottled water quality, you're going to get any article that has the word water in it, anything out on the internet that has the word quality in it, and anything out there that has the word bottled in it, and then not in that order. Like it could be just those words, which obviously is going to net you a ton of different results. So just that in and of itself can, that's where they're kind of starting from, right? That can help narrow it down a little bit. Now, so there's another one that a lot of people don't actually realize that you can do, which is the minus sign in your search bar. So you can, if you type in whatever you want, right? So this one's saying try entering bottled water quality health and then enter minus teeth, right? The minus sign with teeth. So you're going to find that you're going to find articles that omit the word teeth, right? So that's limiting results as well. Um, and so they kind of give this idea of like, okay, try entering bottled water quality in these quotation marks. You have health not in quotation marks, and you have minus teeth. So what this search is going to do is it's going to find this phrase all in a row, bottled water quality. It's also going to find any hits that have the word health in it, and it's going to omit any results that have the word teeth, right? And so they're saying, okay, well, that's only, 250,000 hits. That's a little bit better. Well, there's even another strategy that not a lot of beginning researchers or writers in college know, and that's you can enter site with a colon, and then you can enter whatever type of website that you are looking for. In this case, .edu. You can do a .gov, you can do a .org. So you could try, you can use quotation marks or not quotation marks for specific phrasing. You can use the minus sign to omit words, and then you can also search specific types of sites, right? And then, of course, in their example, they're like, oh, wow, I only have 6,000 results, right? So, and that's how you can start narrowing your results. Now, you can even narrow it further, right? So, most online databases, if not all, and Google Scholar also has this option. There's a box that you can check that talks about using peer-reviewed only articles. Now, peer review is kind of the gold standard, right? It's going to save you a lot of time in your searching for sources if you are trying to find peer-reviewed articles or sources. So a lot of times when you need to write an essay, you'll have a professor that says you must use 5 scholarly sources. Students don't really think about that a lot of times. In scholarly sources, you should just go ahead and make it synonymous with peer-reviewed, right? So if you go find peer-reviewed articles, those are going to be scholarly sources, all right? So if you check a box that's only looking for peer-reviewed sources, that's going to save you a lot of time. Now, peer-reviewed means that whatever that article is, it's gone through a vetting process, right? So the original author has submitted it to a board or a committee of members who go through, they've vetted all the material, they've made sure it's accurate, it's reliable, and that's how they get the peer-reviewed tag. Now, you're only going to find peer-reviewed articles behind paywall services, right? So on licensed databases is what they're called. Now, if you're a student at a college or university, you should have access through your username to licensed databases, whether it's LexisNexis, ProQuest. There's a bunch of them. And so those will have another box that'll say peer-reviewed. So for example, I'll show you if we just go to our college's homepage, Ames Community College. If we scroll down to the bottom, you're going to be able to find the library tab. So as soon as you go to the library tab, and as a student, you can go down here. You can look at all of the databases in here. So if you have a preference on specific database that you like, or that is specific to your particular field, you can go in here. Of course, EBSCOhost is a super popular one. So you're going to find the popular ones in here that I was talking about before. JSTOR is another really popular one. But you're also going to be able to find, like I said, depending on and there's ProQuest. So depending on your field, right? If you're a psychology major, you may want to use a different database that's more specific. That can narrow your search as well. But just on our basic library webpage, you're going to be able to find, and this should be true no matter what university or college you're going to, you should, if you have access to licensed database, there should be an option here, right? Scholarly, so peer-reviewed sources that you can check, and then you can go ahead and continue your search. Now, our college uses this discovery service as kind of its default, but you can, like I said, you can change that right here. So that is what you're looking for with peer-reviewed. And it's going to be behind paywalls because they've already vetted it. They've saved the time to make sure it's reliable. And that's a good source. Now, Google Scholar can be a good source, but most everything you're going to find on Google Scholar that's peer-reviewed, again, it's going to be behind a paywall. It's going to try to tell you, for $4.99, you can read this article. If you're a university or college student, if you are going the Google Scholar route, just take whatever that title is, come back to your university and type in whatever it is that you would like to search, the title of the article, and it should pop up for most databases. You should be able to find it. So that's there's some good videos on Google Scholar that we went over in class that gave a good example. Let's see, what else do they have? So we kind of talked a little bit about Scholarly, what our scholarly articles are peer-reviewed, and it's talking about how you check that box. Now, one of the things that you want to think about when you are going for scholarly sources is whether it's stable or unstable. Now, a stable source means that it exists somewhere out in the world. There's a physical copy of it. Unstable would be like just a website, right? It's anything you're finding on the internet. Now, it's called unstable, and I would recommend not using unstable sources because they're not reliable, right? You could write your paper, and overnight, somebody at that website, whoever owns that domain, they could go on there and edit it. They could take it down. They could change everything. And then your professor, or in the future, if somebody's using whatever essay you wrote and they look at it and they try the link and it's giving them, the 404 error of this doesn't exist, that undermines your credibility as a writer right off the bat. So you want to make sure you're finding a stable source, which means it physically exists somewhere in the world. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use the internet, of course. What you're going to want to look for is PDF files. So PDFs mean that somewhere in the world it exists on a dusty shelf. It's collecting dust somewhere. This shows you the peer review process I explained a little bit earlier. The author submits an article for publication, editor forwards it to reviewers. whatever the committee or reviewers, they're going to check it for accuracy, make sure the facts are right. And this may happen several times. If any of you are interested in graduate school or getting a PhD, this may happen where they kick the article back. If they find things that need to be addressed that aren't accurate, they may kick it back to the original author and say, try again. Right. But as soon as it gets vetted and everybody signs off on it, on that panel or committee, then it will get the peer review tag, which then they can, charge people money for. So differences between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources, right? Essentially, in a nutshell, primary sources are firsthand experiences from the person that experienced it first. Secondary sources are analyzing or breaking down primary sources. Tertiary sources, people are like, what? I've never heard of a tertiary source. They're pretty simple. It's just a reference guide. It's an encyclopedia. It's a dictionary. It's just information. That's all it is. It's a reference guide of some kind. Let's see if there's anything else over here. In general, when you were looking at doing a research paper, you're going to have these sections, and these are sections that you're going to use when we get to writing the actual research paper. An abstract, that's simply is just a 100 to 200 word summary of your own paper. It's strange in the sense it's written in the third person, so you'll feel weird writing about yourself in the third person. Introduction, that's just what it sounds like. You're bringing up the topic, why is it important? Your thesis will be included in here. You may have a literature review depending on your topic, right? What are the different sources you're using? What's any other previous research that's gone into this topic that you're talking about? And then you're going to get into data and methodology section, right? And so your methodology section, you're just providing a narrative account of how you collected your own data, right? How did you get from point A to point Z in your own paper? And then the data section is just that. Like, you go out and you collect your data and then you just import it. You're not writing anything else. It's just raw data. And then you're going to start talking kind of about your results / your discussion. What does the data mean, right? And why is it important? What are the findings? What areas do you need more investigation, right? Oftentimes in the discussion, sometimes they put it in a separate section after the discussion. We're kind of, what was missing? What did you leave out? What would you do differently next time in the future if you were to do the same study? That's kind of the basic structure of a research paper that we're going to be emulating here at the end of the semester when we write our paper. I think this just goes into some more, finding scholarly articles, using databases, things that we've kind of already gone over. There's a lot of overlap here. Getting into the material for the beginning of this week, really it's kind of talking about, okay, moving from being a basic researcher into being more of a critical thinker or engaging with a text, right? And really this whole article, which is pretty lengthy, as you can see, is really about figuring out or coming up with strategies in which you can have purposeful research, or make your research purposeful. And that's something not a lot of people do. They're not used to that. And it talks about kind of how they go through this thought exercise. What kind of reader are you? It asks you, okay, just think about all the reading you've done in the past week. And it says, what was your purpose in reading this, right? And so obviously your purpose is going to be very different if you're reading a children's book to a child versus reading a personal text message, right? And the way in which you digest that text is going to be very different. And so this article is all about how do you make that process a conscious decision in research, right? A lot of people don't think about why they're researching what they're researching and how they're engaging with that text. And that's a really important shift in thinking for beginning college readers and writers. Um, and one of the examples I always use in class is social media, right? A lot of people use social media for various purposes, right? Some people use it and they're serious and they use it as a venting platform, right? They get on there and they want to rant and they rave and they want to vent about the world. A lot of people just get on there, they want to get on their social media to get away from all of that, right? So it's an interesting melting pot, right? And think about your own interactions on social media, because everybody has that person on their feed that they're like, oh, this guy again, or this girl again, right? Like posting this stuff, like stop, right? So, but for them, they are achieving the purpose they want, even though your purpose in going to social media is very different than theirs, right? So this idea of how we take in texts is really important in the research process. You need to really be conscientious or conscious about the way in which you go about the research process and the text that you are digesting and how you engage with that text. This also starts to go into key features of critical reading. Don't let the quotes, dominate your actual paper, right? So you want to expand on quotations. You want to expand on the evidence that you come up with. You don't want to let the evidence do all the talking for you, right? And take away your voice. You want to build off of that, create conversation, new perspectives, right? A good research paper is creating new material. If it's already been done, if somebody else, if it's not fresh, if it's not new, then who cares, right? And that's a big key in research. And that's why getting all the background knowledge, figuring out what already has been contributed to the conversation or the topic that you're looking at, it's really important to learn everything, all the different angles of that. And that's that idea of when you're doing a research paper too, you don't want to come off as like my way or the highway. There's only one, like this is the conclusion and that's what it means and there's no other way, right? Your research should open up, even if you find some really neat findings, some evidence, if you will, that suggests some sort of truths. You don't want to come across as like, well, I just proved it and there's no other way, right? Research should open up conversations. It should never close conversations. And that's a really important shift too, because in high school readers and writers, high school students, they're used to just, hey, there's a correct answer to things. Write an essay about, what, Robert Frost poem means. And there's supposed to be a concrete, I learned this in class, this is the theme, this is the meaning, that end, right? It closes conversation. Versus college reading and writing is very different. You want to open conversation. You want to create critical thinking. You don't want to close conversation loops. You want to create different, unique conversations out there. That's a really different way the beginning college readers and writers look at things. Of course, reading is a rhetorical tool. Rhetoric is all around us every day. Rhetoric, again, is the way in which language or symbols, visuals, everything, texts in general, are designed to have meaning to us or manipulate people, right? And reading is a rhetorical tool, right? It's the way, and they're not just talking, this little section kind of goes over, they're not just talking about reading books, right? They're talking about you read the world in so many different ways. I always talk to people, it's fascinating, go people watching, right? A lot of people like that as a hobby. I love that as a hobby. What you are reading people, right? Using rhetorical devices or your rhetorical knowledge of the situation, time, place, all of that. And you want to bring that to everything, whether that is an actual article or a book, or whether that's a movie, whether that's doing a sociological study on life, observing people, right? So think about reading not in a narrow sense of books. So that's what this is. This little section is kind of all about. Of course, active readers are always looking for connections between texts, right? So when you're going through and finding source material for your research paper, you want to make sure that you take faceting different sources that you're finding, one over here, and maybe you're like, I want to put these two texts in conversation with each other. So you become kind of a mediator of sorts, with these two texts, and you're putting these two authors who never physically had a conversation that we know of in conversation with one another, and you're kind of the bridge between the two, or two or more texts, really. And that's where you can come up with some new material, some new ways of thinking. You're creating a new conversation, right? Whoever thought about putting this author and this author, or this movie and this newspaper article together in conversation with one another, that's new, that's fresh. That can be a good approach to research and creating new kinds of conversation, for that. So hopefully this lesson, this gets into the rest of our reading, for this week, just provide some student examples, of these same processes. Hopefully this week's material gave you some different kind of outlooks on how to go about the research process, both in finding sources, how to do searches online, what a scholarly source is, and then some of the actual ways about thinking about what is a research paper, and what does it do. Well, until next time, College Comp, stay good.